Hello, this is my fifth speech for the Ron Paul curriculum. Today I wanted to talk about my favorite storybook. It's called Mandy. It's about a 10-year-old orphan girl, a bright, curious young girl with brown, boyish hair that falls around her sweet face. It's my favorite line of the book. The book has 4 sections. The first section is spring, and then there's summer, autumn, and winter. It basically talks about what she did in all 4 of those sections. In the first section, which is spring, it starts off describing what the orphanage that she lives in looks like and what she feels while she's there. She basically feels really lonely because she has no memory of her parents at all. She doesn't have any siblings that she knows of. She doesn't have any family members that she knows of at all. So her whole time of living there, she has a really empty, lonely life, but she is the most trusted child out of the whole orphanage. And she's able to go on lone walks in the woods, and she's able to do that often, as many times as she would like. She is usually the one that stays with all the children when they're going out places because she's the most trusted among all the children. Her best friend is Sue, basically like her sister. They share a room in the top house of the orphanage, and they share clothes, anything. They're just like sisters. But even though Sue is Mandy's best friend, she still prefers to be alone most of the time. In the section of spring, she talks about this big wall that represents the boundaries of the orphanage. And she sees these footholds that can go up the wall that she could possibly climb on. So she decides to climb on the footholds, and when she gets to the top, she sees this apple tree branch that can help her lower down. When she's on the other side, she spots a path. And as she's walking down the path, she sees rabbits and birds and butterflies and bees and a rather big hawk levitating over the trees. She walks for several minutes and comes across this rather small and abandoned-looking cottage. She's cautious at first, in fear of someone that might see her. She finds that no one is there, and it's empty. It has a few rooms. The first room she saw was the kitchen. It was very old and dusty. There were spider webs and spiders in the sink. The next room that she finds is the dining room. And then there's a staircase leading up to a bedroom. And then her favorite room was the shell room, what she called it. It had shells from top to bottom on the walls, all over. It was a beautiful room. Most beautiful things that she's ever seen. After she looks around at the cottage, she goes outside and she eventually falls asleep in the grass. And she wakes up about 4 o'clock, realizing that it's getting kind of late and she has to go back to the orphanage. And on her way back, she decides that she's going to make the cottage her own. So she goes there every day in the spring and makes it all her own. She eventually starts taking things from the orphanage to put in the cottage, which burdens her, but she loves the fact of having a cottage that's like a house. It's a little mini house just for her. In the section of summer, she goes to this local grocery store, and on every Saturday, she gets a little bit of money for working there from the morning to the afternoon. So she still has some time to go to the cottage. And at the store, she buys several little small things for herself, some utensils and silverware and food. She buys broth. One morning she made some broth and took a biscuit that from her breakfast at the orphanage and heated up the broth in the fireplace and had some broth and a biscuit on the stairs at her cottage. And she liked the feeling of happy and content at the cottage. She also bought several big flowers and small flowers and box hedges for the cottage, and she made it really pretty and cleaned it up a lot. She spent a lot of her time there at the cottage. In autumn, one of the big events that happened was she broke Jake's shears, who is he maintains all of the gardens at the orphanage, and they were really big shears there in the shed that Mandy wanted to use for a branch that she needed to cut at the orphanage, or the cottage. And she ends up breaking them, and she has to explain to the matron what happened and why she was using them. This is a really big part of in the autumn section, because that was a really big event, and she almost got caught going to the cottage several times in autumn. In winter, which is my favorite section, and I think a lot of people's favorite sections in the book, she gets down with a cold, and she's not allowed to go outside. So she stays inside for several weeks, and Matron Bridie tells her she is not allowed to go outside until she was fully recovered. Well, one day when she was supposed to be taking a nap, she went outside in extreme weather conditions. It was thunderstorming, and there was snow, and it was raining. It was really cold outside, but she still went outside, and she basically risked her life so she could see the cottage. That alone tells you how important the cottage was to her. If she was able to steal all those things from the orphanage and go outside in the cold and raining, then it really means a lot to her. She loved the cottage. It was her own place that she could be by herself. And one day when she was at the cottage, Sue followed her. So without Sue following her, no one would have known where Mandy was. So Mandy gets stuck at the cottage because she's so sick she can't lift her head off of the floor, and she starts seeing things that scare her. She's finally rescued by Mr. Fitzgerald, who owns the cottage, and he takes her back to his mansion with his wife at the mansion. They both take care of her during the time that she's sick. She's sick till Christmas. She starts getting better at Christmas, but before then she met their son Jonathan, which is he's around her age, and he showed her around the mansion. And when she got too sick and tired, though, she had to go back to her room. But she was able to get around and look at the mansion, how big it was. It was really big. She describes how amazing it is to feel the loving care of the Fitzgeralds and how they are like family to Mandy. And after Christmas, she spends Christmas there with the Fitzgeralds. They give her a red dress with red shoes to match it, a ring with her name carved in it, and a teddy bear from Jonathan. After she spent Christmas with the Fitzgeralds, she had to go back to the orphanage, and that night she was going to run away because she could not stand the pain of not having a family. But thankfully that night the Fitzgeralds adopted her before she ran away, and she finally has a family. So, conclusions. She is really lonely and scared of not ever being adopted. Her cottage was a way of running away from her problems, and she finally gets adopted and feels happy and content. So this was one of my favorite storybooks, and if you've never read it, I recommend that you read it. It's a really good book, and it's really entertaining to read, too. That concludes my 5th speech for the Ron Paul curriculum. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you have a wonderful day.